Hello, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Stryker, and you are watching the Mech channel. And today we have Doki on the show, explaining the basics of Apex 1v1 mechanics. The following is a guide on the basics of strafing, dodging, positioning, and how to aim in 1v1 situations. Hopefully after watching this, you will stop being horrible at video games.
Thanks, Stryker. For today's guide, I've prepared some real 1v1 footage taken from me going 134-12 on R5, and I'll be pausing to talk about what's going on. Before I begin with the footage, I must first shout out Sam and Amos7 for the theory side of things. However, I want to make my guide as basic as possible and avoid you, the viewer, from overcomplicating things, which is something that a lot of intermediate players fall into. Without further ado, let's begin. And pause. Let's start with the basics. One of the words you'll hear a lot in this side of the Apex scene is the word bias. What is bias? Bias refers to how you have moved throughout the fight. Moving more to one side than the other means more bias. And if you rip a simple anti-mirror like how you see a lot of terrible players do in the firing range, those have zero bias. This is a very important concept to know going forward. Look at this fight again. You see that over time I had a lot of bias. But I'm not simply repositioning myself and walking in a straight path. That would make me very easy to hit. So instead I pause and start walking again to throw off the other guy's aim. You can see it miss as a result.
However, does this mean that anti-mirroring is always bad and you should never use it in fights? No. Anti-mirroring or mirroring is a form of strafe aiming that lets you maximize your damage output, as you only change directions when the enemy does, letting you focus on your aim. With a biased strafe, you do indeed avoid more damage, but it is harder to aim with since you will need to readjust your aim with each direction change. Therefore, choosing which type of strafe to use is then a question of advantage. Do you have a health or positional advantage? Or are you willing to take the hard aim duel so that you can kill the enemy the fastest? There's no answer that is correct all the time.
Alright, we can skip a little bit ahead here.
Oh, again, skip jump, I'm dead. Well, I actually won that. Oh.
Alright, while I did win that, I played this fight horribly. It's hard to see from the footage here, but the other guy barely moved. But I overreacted to his strafes, so I whiffed half the mag. This is the main thing people struggle with in 1v1s, but often they think it's a lack of reactivity or mouse control. While that is certainly important, knowing how the enemy is currently moving is far more important. What I should have done here is to under-aim and just make sure that I'm on target. Remember that bias thing I talked about? Here, I beamed this guy for 160 because they had too much bias, just moving in a straight line. Long, hard strafes like this are very easy even for M&K players to track, and obviously also controller players. Shaky aim at the end there, but a great example of bias being useful. Alright, let me skip a little bit ahead here. This one is obvious, but jumping gets you killed. It's extremely easy to read, and with the limited air strafing in this game, you can easily be tracked mid-air.
9! How?
Alright, I threw this one, but hey, we learn from our mistakes, right? Here, I'm standing right next to the wall with no cover and I did a ras strafe, meaning no bias. It's extremely easy for the other guy to kill me because he doesn't even need to move his mouse.
What do you mean there's a 9?
This one is important. Look at the enemy bullet traces. If we can see that they're straight missing, I'll be stupid to strafe back into them. Even if in a vacuum I would be hitting a long strafe with too much bias, in that situation that is clearly the optimal thing to do.
9.5 volt, and you can just out DPM me. Okay.
Alright, I can't lie, I was pretty toxic for doing that. But that's a great example of bias. Guy couldn't hit me with the flatline. Also, different movement text could be very useful in repositioning yourself. For example, look at that super glide over his head. But no, he didn't see me hitting it at all. So it was safe for me to do that, compared to his next guy coming up.
A lot of people just jump on here and die, like that.
Right into my out 9.
Don't do that. They don't understand that like a simple strafe on the ground is more just better.
Here's a great example of under-aiming. Here you can see that I barely moved my mouse, while the other guy was moving. But the key is that I don't need to move my mouse when there's very little bias in their strafes, because my crosshair is on them already. Something to keep in mind is that you don't have to be aiming exactly in the middle of the enemy. Here's a great example from a previous R5 session. For reference, I think this guy is not scripting. But look here, on his screen, he's moving around hella fast. But over time, he has zero bias. This means I don't need to aim and he gets hit for free. Similarly, in real fights, if someone is in a doorway or any tight spaces, you don't need to aim closer to the wall than the width of their hitbox.
That's a bad strafe from that guy. There's also a bad strafe from this guy. That was horrible. I don't have like a specific thing or pattern that I do. Because it never should be a pattern that you do. It should be something that you do like actively. Like you think about it.
That's very true, me. One of the key takeaways you should get from this is that dodging isn't a specific pattern, and instead is something you actively do and react to how the fight is currently.
So for example, like look at that dude, he was just missing me. So like why I strafe back into him? So I hit a long strafe. Same here. Okay, like that guy just hit a good strafe on me, I'm dead.
Man, that was embarrassing. But there I had a bad aim strategy with the wingman. I was trying to wait for them to walk back into my crosshair, but they know what they're doing and simply never strafed back into me. So I didn't hit them as fast or as accurately as I should have.
There's also the possibility that the guy could just be good at the game without aim assist and kills me.
Alright, that was pretty bad. No bias from me in that fight. What I should have done was to strafe out of the cover and then try to dodge the bullets, instead of standing right next to the wall, which is a mistake that a lot of people commit. Wait, hold up, this one is funny.
Hold up. Fuck. I'm horrible. Are we a movement beast?
A slide could be useful in repositioning in the fight, but note that it has too much bias and could be easily tracked if you slide right in front of someone.
I'm fucking coked, I'm coked, bruh. I'm the best.
Wow, that was rough. Great shots at the end there. While strafing is important, at the end of the day, you also need good aim to win fights.
Alright, nice frags, dude. However, the producers have just told me that this segment has to be around 10 minutes long. Otherwise, the show would get bad ratings or something. So can you speed it up a little bit?
You can't under it? Yeah,
What?
it's hard to do under it, man.
Okay, I guess. Here, I've got the high ground from them, and this means that I have a massive advantage. A lot of people know about this, but why? It's because I can move back and immediately on their screen, my available hitbox becomes a lot smaller. Here, nerds will also like to point out the angle between the enemy and the normal, or for the high school students out there, the perpendicular line from the wall. I don't want to get too in-depth in this guide, but a good rule of thumb should be that the angle should be limited to make aiming more difficult for the other guy.
That is fucking clean.
Damn, that was clean. However, the point is that movement could be useful. It's still important that you learn it and have it ready when you need to. A good consideration before doing them would be safety. Is it safe for me to climb up? Or is it very predictable for me to hit a wall bounce, etc. As for lurch strafing, a relatively new thing in the scene, similar concepts apply. How much bias was there? How readable was that movement? Again, it could be a good tool to use where needed, but it's not always useful. Also, throughout these fights, I crouch quite a bit. Crouching is a great tool that lets you vary your movement speed, and to juke players. For example, good wingman players often aim at the head level, so if I crouch and then uncrouch consistently, or even trying to predict when they're going to fire and crouch, I could dodge their shots. However, against the low bobs you see in pubs who aim at the center of mass, you could be crouching right into their shot.
Alright, I know, I'll just skip to the end.
Yep, 144 to 12. These guys just got farmed. But more importantly, what did we learn today? A couple of things to conclude. First, bias. Key to most strays and is the most important thing in a 1v1. Secondly, we have reading. In terms of positioning, reading where and how the enemy is going to move and playing accordingly is key. If you see that they are missing, strafe accordingly. If they're not missing, get out of the beam as fast as possible. Thirdly, Apex specific things like crouching or movement are important to learn, but not always useful. A good strafe is often better than a tricky lurch strafe. Finally, how do you get good? Practice. Get on R5, spam some pubs, LG duels, whatever. Just get on and grind. As I've said, all of these are tools for you to use. It's on you to apply them in-game accordingly. There's no strict pattern or anything to learn. It's all dynamic. Alright, that's it from me. Back to you, Stryker.
Thanks, Doki. Hopefully all of you will stop being low elo after watching this. Now, coming up next, we have invited a few aim trainer mains to explain the intricacies on why playing schizo tracking scenes 3 hours a day for PBs means they are actually really talented at FPS games, right after the commercial break.